much. Appreciate it. What would happen if you turned on that tap this morning and nothing came out? Ever think about what do we do without water? We kind of take it for granted, don't we? What I want to talk about for the next few minutes is what's happening with water around the world, why in no place maybe more the epicenter of some of the water challenges than right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But what's going on with water and what are we doing about it? If you look around the world, in Africa today, 40 billion hours a year are spent hauling water around to get it from a well back home. They don't have the luxuries of the tap that we do. We've got about 4/5 of the world today don't have access, or by 2025 won't have access to clean water like you do. 1.1 billion people today no access to clean water. 1.8 million children die every year due to waterborne disease. And these are challenges that we're facing today, and we kind of ignore them because we're so fortunate here. But where in the heck is all the water going? There's a picture of Lake Mead just a few years ago, the main watershed for the city of Las Vegas and one of the biggest watersheds in our country, down 150 feet. Say, what is going on? If you were to look at all of the water demand in the whole world, it would be about 4,500 billion cubic meters. Not quite like the universe that we were just hearing about, but a big amount of water. What's interesting is just a few years ago, we reached a point where our renewable supply of water is no longer enough to meet that demand. It's only about 4,200 billion cubic meters. So that little gap you see in there, that's this declining reservoirs and the other challenges we face. By the time you're in college, that's going to be a tremendous gap. And if we continue the path that we're on, it'll be 470 trillion gallon gap between how much water we need and how much water is readily available through rain and natural processes. Obviously not sustainable. We can't continue down this path. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on. So today, we've got the same water here that's been on the earth for billions of years. And it covers most of the world, but only about 3% of that water is fresh water, and most of that is actually in ice, so it's not available to us. In fact, less than 1% of the fresh water is readily available to us, and a tiny portion of that is actually drinking water quality available for us. So we're actually tapping a very small amount of water today. If you look at where that water is being used, about 70% of the world's water supply today goes to irrigation to produce the food that we eat. 20% goes to industry to make the stuff that we use, and about 10% is left for human consumption, and that's where our water is going. What's interesting, if you look over this last century, the world's population tripled during that period of time, but our consumption of water went up by 6 times. By the middle of this next century, there'll be an additional 3 billion people on this earth, but the problem is where these water shortages are today, that's where the people are growing, so we're just going to compound this problem. If you look at Los Angeles, the water supply in the Los Angeles basin can support roughly 1 million people. Unfortunately, by the time you're in college, there's going to be 22 million people there. How are we going to support them in the future? Closer to home, El Paso and San Antonio, roughly enough water for the next 10 to 20 years. Central Florida has less than 5 years if we continue down this path. Not an option. So you say, well, I don't really use that much water. I only drink like a half a glass a day. Not that big a deal. I take a short shower. Well, actually, I want to show you a few things that you may not realize how you're impacting water every day. So this morning, you got out of bed, flip on that light switch. If you know where that power is coming from, if you go back through that line, it's actually coming from a big old power plant. And these power plants in the US and around the world use roughly 50% of the water going to industry, goes to our power generation. It takes a tremendous amount of water to make and to generate power, and it takes a lot of power to make the water that we use today. You go to the bathroom, you brush your teeth, kind of take care of your business in the morning. That water is actually coming from a water treatment plant up the road from you that purifies this water and brings it to us. As that water comes to your house, roughly 1/4 of the water that enters your house, what do you think it goes? Flush the old toilets, exactly. So a lot of water goes there. It takes roughly 40 gallons of water to do a load of laundry. That 10-minute shower this morning, which may not be only 10 minutes, 50 gallons of water every time we take that shower. 4 gallons just to brush your teeth, unless you turn the water off while you're brushing your teeth, which is a good thing. Only about a quart of water if you do that. So there's a lot of things that we do every day that consume this water that you may be familiar with. It takes roughly 20 liters a day per person of water just to survive. This is what's necessary. But as you travel around the world and look at different countries and how we use our water, you'll see different places use a lot more water. And unfortunately, being number one is not always a good thing. We're water hogs. The U.S. uses more water than anybody else in the world. Roughly 100 gallons or 380 liters per person per day of water that we impact. So it's a tremendous amount of water. So you're moving on through your day, you get dressed, you don't think about it, but those clothes that we put on, pair of jeans that we might wear in the morning, 1,800 gallons of water to produce the jeans, about 400 gallons to produce a cotton t-shirt. Tremendous amount of water there. So we sit down to the old family for breakfast. That grain that we might eat in our cereal, 25 gallons of water to make 1 pound of grain. The milk that we put on that cereal, actually 2,000 gallons of water go into the production of that milk. And unfortunately, as a world, we're becoming more of a meat-eating society, 2,400 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. So again, these things are incredibly impactful on water. Those devices that we all love to use, the microchip in those devices takes roughly 10 gallons of water to produce 1 microchip, and we're producing millions of them every day. So these are the ways that you're impacting water you may not be aware of. Maybe mom and dad drove you to school in the morning, 39,000 gallons of water to produce 1 automobile. And got to put gas in that car. It takes almost 100 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of gasoline. Again, huge amount of water that impact. You don't even think about it, but if you come to an area like Dallas, a lot of irrigation outside, over 50% of the water used in a commercial building is going to outdoor irrigation throughout the southern United States. So tremendous amount of water that we could be drinking or could be for human consumption is going on the ground. So you say, well, what can we do? You know, what's going on out there? Some really unique things that are going on, fortunately, to keep us from getting into the tough situation that we could be in. There's 2 basic things we got to do. I always think about it as 2 big old levers. First, we've got to pull back on the demand lever. We got to stop using so darn much water, and we have to push forward on the lever of increasing supply. We've talked about there's a finite amount of water in this world, but we can look at new and different sources of water to be able to answer our demand. So first, let's look at this whole idea of reducing demand. We've got the 3 basic buckets of food, industry, and life that water is being used for. First of all, irrigation today, I mentioned 70% of the world's water supply is going to irrigation, and right now it's pretty darn inefficient. We're just flooding the water out there on a lot of these fields, and about 50% of that water that's used for irrigation actually evaporates before it ever makes it to the crop. So there's some really cool technologies that are enable us to stop doing that. A lot of these are coming out of Israel and a lot out of the Middle East and countries that are very scarce in water today, and are enabling us to reduce the water for irrigation by 70 to 90%. Fantastic technology. In the industry world, we're seeing tremendous interest in implementation of technologies that are enabling industry to produce their products without taking so much water. Coca-Cola over the last several years is an example of a company that is very much focused, and they've gone from over 5 liters per liter of beverage to a little over 2 liters per liter of beverage produced today. So great reduction. We're also seeing a lot more monitoring and interest in continuing to reduce that amount of water. So we see great advances there. Finally, in this water for human life, there's a lot of great technologies, low-flow toilets. There's a lot of things that are maybe in your house today that are using much less water. We need to continue to implement those. The picture on the top right there is actually not a fountain. That's a leaky pipe. That's a geyser shooting up in the middle of a road. One of the challenges we face is that our infrastructure, our pipes are old. They're leaking, and so we're producing a lot of water that never makes it to the end of the line. City of Chicago makes 2 billion gallons of water a day for the citizens. 500 million gallons of that, 1/4 of it, never makes it to the end of the line. So we got to stop that. And a lot of other technologies continue. The company that I work with does a lot around advanced irrigation technologies and other things to continue to reduce that consumption of water. So this other big lever we talked about is how do you come up with some new sources? Where do we find new water? 3 areas, and there's a lot more than this. One is rainwater. It seems so simple, capture the rainwater and reuse it, but there's a lot of advanced technologies that are enabling us to go ahead and grab that water. The project going on right in here in Dallas, the University of Texas at Dallas, it's looking at capturing rainwater on the top deck of a parking garage and using that for irrigation instead of fresh water. Desalination is a way you take seawater and remove the salt so we can drink it and use it for other things. Technology in desalination has reduced the cost of desal by 80% over the last 20 years, so it's very affordable now to be able to produce water. And then finally, water reuse. Great opportunity, just like we take our soda cans and other things and reuse those. Instead of using water once and dumping it down the drain, there's a lot of reuse technology that enables us to purify that water and reuse it and really reduce our costs. This bottom right corner is not a house. That's actually a wastewater treatment plant stuck inside a house. This is a plant in Missouri, and there's a technology inside that house that treats water for 1,400 homes in the area and provides that water back for non-drinking water uses. So some great technology that is enabling us to change the future. So the question I have for you, what are you going to do? What will you do to make sure that you can help change this future? Time's running out. We don't have an option. So really look forward to you guys helping us change the world and have a much brighter future for all of us. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.